Well, in a surprising turn of events, we did actually get a shotgun nerf today, and that was actually for the combat shotgun. Something I didn't really expect. With the VLK Rogue nerf, I expected it very much so, but the combat shotgun, not gonna lie, kind of took me off guard. I didn't really expect it. It wasn't really that bad. So today we're going to go over what exactly changed. We're going to go over some new damage and stat numbers, and then we're going to go over the new best class, and then my thoughts overall on this whole nerf. So just buckle up, guys, and let's get right into it. So first, if we take a look at the patch notes, we have in the shotgun category, there's no explanation here, which is kind of a bummer. I was hoping they'd kind of go into it a little bit more, but they don't really seem to do that with these shotguns sometimes. So we have the combat shotgun, and it looks like the head and neck multipliers were decreased. So they used to be 1.1, now they're about 1.05. Not a huge deal because a lot of people didn't hit headshots anyway, but it is kind of a helpful thing to have when you are an accurate player. So with 12 gauge, it also looks like they toned down the damage multiplier, so you used to get about a 5% damage bonus, but now it looks like it's only at about 2.5%. So basically that got cut in half. Then the sawed-off barrel got the big nerf here, and that basically got a range penalty from 20%, it went to 25%. So it's going to be 25% worse at range, which is kind of weird because usually it gives you more range, but I think they mean effective range in total. And then we have the bonus damage, which was decreased down from 20% all the way to 15%. So I think this is how it used to be before it got its buff. So that's kind of sad. Those are some pretty hefty nerfs altogether, and you'll see they do have some pretty bad implications for the gun. So let's get into some numbers now in-game that I was able to test. Now for this section, I just want to go over some important points and not go over every single little detail just because there's just so much. So I'm just going to kind of go over some of the main stuff here. Like before this update happened, before the nerf, this gun with the build that I recommended, the 12 gauge sawed off barrel with incendiary and vital, that had a pretty ridiculous amount of damage out to about that 5-meter mark where it dealt like about 290 damage, and then out to about 8.5 meters it was able to two-shot kill only if you were really hitting your shots well. If you were aiming down sights and not jumping around like crazy and your pellets connected, you could get two-shot kills out to about 8.5 meters. But at that range, I have to know it wasn't dealing that 290 damage, it was dealing more around the 150 to 160 mark, so I don't think it was really that strong. Now after this update with this nerf, it looks like for me personally with the same build, I was able to get two shots consistently at around 5 meters, and that's with or without EOD. It didn't really make a difference in the range. So it was basically consistently getting at 8.5 meters down to 5 meters. That's really not good. Now one thing I want to point here is it's pretty inconsistent because I was also able to get these two shots out to about 6.5 meters, but it was very inconsistent. So it's kind of weird. I know shotguns are just a little inconsistent at times, but basically this, 5 meters away, you'll get consistent two shots, but at about 6.5 meters, you can still technically two shot. It's just you have to hit more like the chest and the sort of neck and head area. I think that's why it was causing some inconsistencies. So if you aim a little bit higher, you will extend the range just a little bit, but it's probably not practical at all. So realistically, you're probably going to be getting like 5-meter two-shot kills with the build that I described, which was in general the best one to run in my opinion. So incendiary on its own is still good, but it's just nowhere near as good as it used to be. If you don't have incendiary and you want to just run the base buckshot ammo with the 12 gauge vital and sawed off barrel, your max damage range is about that 5-meter mark like it was before, and your two shots are basically that 5-meter mark. There's really nothing outside of that. So incendiary is nice if you want just a little bit more damage, but it does kind of make it a little inconsistent past that 5-meter mark, but it is possible, so I still recommend it to get those two shots outside of that 5-meter range. So we also do have buck and slug, which I tested, and it seemed to get two shots basically around that same 5-meter mark. It was about 5.2 to be exact. Sometimes it's just annoying to have to split it into tenths of a meter, but it does make a difference at times. Then the thing about the buck and slug that I really liked was it seemed like you could get two-shot headshots out to about the 7-meter mark. So in my opinion, that's actually a lot better. If you're aiming like upper chest and head area, really buck and slug is actually pretty good and technically better than incendiary, just because it can carry that damage with that slug a little bit further out. And yeah, you can two-shot headshot out to around 7 meters, which, I say that like I'm excited, but it's really not as good as it used to be. It's just, hey, it's kind of a little bit better now. And of course, that's with 12 gauge, sawed-off barrel, and buck and slug and vital. So that's a actually decent way to run this gun now, I would say. We also have the Chariot barrel that didn't really get nerfed, but it can also two-shot out to about 5 meters with buck and slug, and two-shot headshot out to that 7-meter mark. There's just like little tenths of a meter of a difference between the Chariot barrel and the sawed-off barrel, but also the reason I like the Chariot barrel sometimes is because you don't lose a bunch of accuracy and hipfire accuracy. It's a lot tighter and condensed with the pellets, so if you're jumping around and stuff, you can actually hit your shots a lot more clean. You just don't get as much damage and a little bit more range with the sawed-off barrel. So it's up to you. They're both great barrels, but as for the other barrels, they're still pretty crappy. Don't bother with them. Just use the Chariot barrel or the sawed-off barrel. A few other things I do want to talk about. It looks like reduced powder does still in fact really not hurt your range at all, but that's only if you're using 12 gauge in the sawed-off build that I always recommend. So for some reason, I don't know, maybe it's just 12 gauge is bugged with it, but it doesn't really seem to reduce your range when you have 12 gauge equipped. But if you just run the 16 gauge ammo and stuff, it does actually hurt your range. So if you're going to use reduced powder, just make sure you have 12 gauge on it and the sawed-off barrel and stuff, because then it won't actually affect your range. I don't know why. Maybe it's a weird thing when I was testing, but it's just kind of strange, I know. Now, pack powder, again, with the same build, I'm recommending using 12 gauge and these other barrels. It doesn't seem to give you any more range, so I don't really recommend pack powder. It just kind of hurts your fire rate, so not really a great attachment there. I would say the best are still incendiary, buck and slug, which is probably my new favorite, and then of course we have reduced powder, which is probably the bottom tier of the three. One thing I did want to mention too is because of the implications of this nerf to the sawed-off barrel and the headshot multipliers and stuff, it looks like with slugs you will no longer one-shot kill in headshots. So basically with slugs in this gun, there's always going to be 2 headshots at least, or 1 headshot, 1 body shot. So it's just not really as good as it used to be ever. I mean, there's no point really in using it now with slugs because your one-shot kill potential is gone. They kind of just butchered it. So really sad to see, because that was not an easy build to use, and I think this is not something they directly were nerfing, but it just happened because of the nerfs we got to the other things. So if you wanted to use a one-shot kill slug shotgun, that just doesn't exist anymore. In Warzone, there is no such thing as a one-shot slug shotgun anymore. It used to be the combat shotgun, but not anymore, so that's a big fat rip for me. So as far as the best class, I think it's still relatively the same as it always has been. I don't really see much change needed here, but basically it's the sawed-off barrel, of course, with the full choke, the CG-C2MY, Vital, Quick, the taped grip, 12 gauge ammo, and the SMLE pistol grip. In terms of the ammunition, I would say try buck and slug first and see how it feels, because I know you lose some pellets and it's a little bit slow to aim down sights, but see how it feels and see if you can actually manage to get some good headshots with it. Otherwise, I would say stick with incendiary, and then the last resort you can always run reduced powder, but I'd say just stick with buck and slug and incendiary. Those are still probably your best options overall. As far as my thoughts on this nerf, I think it was completely unnecessary. Just like with the nerf to the crossbow, yeah, they went and even nerfed the Modern Warfare crossbow. It was just a little too much and kind of unnecessary in my opinion. They did the same thing with the VLK Rogue where, yeah, I could see it being warranted that it got a nerf, maybe not as excessive as it was, but this one, it's the same case. You could argue it was maybe a little too strong up close, but maybe just tone down the damage, but they went and they sort of changed the gun entirely so that it's just way weaker than it used to be even before the buffs it got. So it's kind of weird, kind of annoying, and I wish we could kind of see why they do that, why they don't like... I would like to see why in the notes, kind of why they decide to make these changes for the shotgun, because I just don't get it. And so now I'm just kind of left wondering in the dark, why do they even bother doing this? Maybe they just hate shotguns, who knows? But, you know, I do like to give the devs the benefit of the doubt, because they have the numbers and the stats, and a lot of people forget this, but they have access to all the things about these guns. And I did notice this gun had a very high KD in its usage, even though it wasn't used a lot. It had like a 1.3 KD, which is pretty impressive for a shotgun. So I don't know, maybe that had something to do with it, but either way, it's really sad to see. I'm sad it got nerfed. I don't think it needed this much of a nerf at all, or really a nerf at all. I really don't think it did. It was pretty high risk and high reward, and it was the first shotgun we had that was actually, well, besides the VLK Rogue, really incredibly strong and basically competing with a lot of SMGs up close. But with this one, it didn't have the time to kill. It just had great movement, and you had to, you know, be really good with your movement to use it well. So kind of a bummer there. But as for my thoughts on it as a whole now, I think it's still sort of the jack of all trades type of shotgun, and it still might actually be the best pump action because of its fire rate, and it's so good in other ways. It just kind of balances out. It's just not near as strong as it was. So, but that's going to do it for this video, guys. So down below in the comments, I want to know, as usual, What are your thoughts on this nerf? Was it too much? Was it not enough? Are you sad about any of the other buffs or nerf we got in this Season 5 update? And with all that being said, guys, I will see you in the next video.